Attraction toward older men is often misunderstood as a preference for age, status, or external advantages. But psychological research and relationship dynamics suggest a deeper explanation. What truly draws many women toward older men is not the number of years they have lived, but the emotional stability they are perceived to possess. Emotional stability creates a sense of safety, predictability, and calm that the human nervous system naturally seeks in close relationships, especially when considering long-term connection. Emotional stability refers to the ability to regulate emotions, respond rather than react, and remain grounded during stress or conflict. Older men are often perceived as having experienced more of life's challenges, which can translate into better emotional regulation. Through successes, failures, relationships, and responsibilities, they may have learned that impulsive reactions and emotional volatility carry long-term costs. This lived experience can result in a calmer presence, which is subconsciously reassuring. Female psychology is particularly sensitive to emotional cues, and a man who remains composed under pressure signals that he can be relied upon during difficult moments. From an evolutionary and psychological standpoint, emotional stability is associated with protection and continuity. A stable partner is less likely to escalate conflict, abandon responsibility, or act unpredictably. This does not mean older men are inherently more stable, but they are often perceived that way because maturity is associated with consistency, patience, and self-control. These traits reduce emotional uncertainty, which is one of the strongest sources of anxiety in intimate relationships. Another important factor is communication style. Men who have developed emotional stability tend to listen more, interrupt less, and respond with thoughtfulness rather than defensiveness. This creates an environment where a woman feels heard and respected. Feeling emotionally seen strengthens attachment and trust, which are central elements of attraction. In contrast, emotional instability, regardless of age, often triggers vigilance and emotional withdrawal rather than desire. It is also important to recognize that attraction is influenced by how a person manages responsibility. Older men are often perceived as having clearer life direction, stronger boundaries, and a more defined sense of self. These qualities are psychologically calming because they reduce ambiguity. When someone appears comfortable with who they are and where they are going, it allows others to relax emotionally rather than feel the need to manage uncertainty. Crucially, this attraction is not guaranteed by age alone. Emotional stability can exist at any age, and emotional immaturity can persist well into later life. Women who are drawn to older men are often responding to behaviors such as patience during disagreement, consistency in actions, accountability, and emotional restraint. These signals indicate reliability and inner security, which are far more influential than physical age or social status. In essence, attraction toward older men reflects a preference for emotional safety rather than chronology. When emotional stability is present, it fosters trust, reduces stress, and allows attraction to deepen naturally. Age may influence perception, but it is emotional maturity that ultimately determines whether attraction grows or fades. Women test potential partners not as a form of manipulation or game playing, but as a deeply rooted psychological process designed to evaluate long-term safety, leadership, and consistency. These tests are often subtle, unconscious, and woven into everyday interactions. From a psychological perspective, they serve as filtering mechanisms that help determine whether a man is emotionally, mentally, and behaviorally reliable over time. Long-term safety is not limited to physical protection. It primarily refers to emotional and psychological safety. A woman needs to know whether a man can handle stress, disagreement, and uncertainty without becoming reactive, aggressive, or withdrawn. Testing often appears through mild conflict, challenging questions, emotional vulnerability, or unexpected changes in plans. How a man responds in these moments reveals whether he is emotionally regulated or easily destabilized. Calm responses signal strength and reliability, while overreaction or defensiveness signals potential instability. Leadership is another core quality being assessed. Psychological leadership is not dominance or control. It is the ability to remain grounded, make decisions, and take responsibility without needing constant validation. Women may test leadership by observing how a man handles uncertainty, whether he can guide a situation calmly or if he collapses under pressure. Indecision, excessive people-pleasing, or avoidance suggests a lack of inner direction. In contrast, a man who can lead himself emotionally demonstrates the capacity to lead a relationship. Consistency is equally critical. Attraction may begin with chemistry, but trust is built through predictability. Women observe whether a man's words align with his actions over time. Tests related to consistency often involve small promises, follow-through, and emotional availability. Inconsistent behavior triggers uncertainty, which weakens emotional attachment. Consistency reassures the subconscious that the environment is stable and safe to invest in emotionally. These tests are rarely direct. A woman is unlikely to explicitly ask whether a man is stable or reliable. Instead, she watches patterns. She notices whether he shows up when he says he will, whether his mood fluctuates dramatically, and whether his behavior changes when challenged. The purpose is not to provoke failure, but to gather information. The nervous system responds to patterns far more than words. Importantly, passing these tests does not require perfection. It requires authenticity and self-regulation. Attempting to perform, impress, or manipulate often backfires because it creates inconsistency over time. Psychological safety emerges when behavior is aligned with values, not when responses are rehearsed. Men who understand this process often realize that attraction deepens when they remain emotionally grounded and consistent, even when tested. Reactivity, defensiveness, or attempts to control outcomes signal insecurity rather than strength. Female psychology responds most positively to men who can maintain emotional stability while respecting boundaries and expressing clarity. Ultimately, these tests are not obstacles but indicators of relational readiness. When a man demonstrates safety, leadership, and consistency through his actions, the testing naturally decreases. Trust replaces evaluation, and attraction evolves into deeper emotional connection, built on reliability rather than uncertainty. The first question usually evaluates emotional control under pressure, and it is one of the most important psychological filters in attraction and long-term bonding. This question is rarely spoken aloud, yet it is constantly being asked through situations, tone, and interaction. Emotional control under pressure signals maturity, reliability, and inner security, all of which are essential for a woman to feel safe investing emotionally. Pressure can appear in many forms. It may be disagreement, criticism, emotional expression, uncertainty, or even playful challenge. When tension arises, a woman observes not just what a man says, but how he regulates his emotions in that moment. Does he become defensive, irritated, or dismissive, or does he remain calm, present, and respectful? Emotional control does not mean emotional suppression. It means the ability to acknowledge feelings without being ruled by them. From a psychological standpoint, emotional regulation is directly linked to nervous system stability. A man who can remain grounded under pressure communicates that he can handle stress without becoming unpredictable. This reduces anxiety and builds trust. Uncontrolled emotional reactions, on the other hand, signal potential volatility. Even minor outbursts can register as warning signs because they suggest how a person might behave under greater stress. This test often happens early and repeatedly. A woman may bring up a sensitive topic, question a decision, or express a differing opinion. She is observing whether the man listens or immediately seeks to dominate, justify, or retreat. Over-explaining and seeking approval can be just as destabilizing as anger, because both suggest a lack of emotional self-sufficiency. Emotional control is shown through measured responses, steady tone, and the ability to pause before reacting. Emotional pressure also reveals self-worth. Men who are secure in themselves do not feel threatened by disagreement. They can hold their perspective while respecting another's viewpoint. This balance communicates confidence and maturity. In contrast, men who tie their self-esteem to being right or liked often respond with tension, defensiveness, or avoidance. Female psychology interprets this as emotional fragility rather than strength. Another key aspect of this evaluation is consistency. Emotional control must be sustained, not performed once. A calm reaction followed by resentment or passive aggression later undermines trust. Women observe patterns over time to assess whether emotional regulation is genuine or situational. Authentic emotional control creates a predictable emotional environment, which allows attraction to deepen rather than remain superficial. Importantly, emotional control does not mean being emotionally distant. It involves being present, empathetic, and responsive without losing composure. A man who can acknowledge emotions, set boundaries, and communicate calmly demonstrates leadership over his internal state. This form of self-leadership is deeply attractive because it suggests he can navigate challenges without destabilizing the relationship. Ultimately, the first question is about safety. Emotional control under pressure reassures a woman that conflict will not become chaos and vulnerability will not be punished. When this question is answered positively through behavior, trust grows, defenses lower, and attraction moves from curiosity to deeper emotional connection. The second question measures values, boundaries, and self-respect, and it plays a decisive role in determining whether attraction can evolve into lasting trust. This question is also rarely spoken directly. Instead, it emerges through subtle situations that test how firmly a man is rooted in his principles and how consistently he honors himself. Female psychology places strong importance on this evaluation because values and boundaries determine long-term stability far more than charm or chemistry. Values are revealed through decisions, not declarations. A woman observes whether a man's actions align with what he claims to believe. When faced with pressure, temptation, or disagreement, does he remain consistent, or does he shift his stance to gain approval or avoid discomfort? Inconsistency signals a lack of internal compass. A man who adjusts his values to please others may appear flexible, but psychologically he is perceived as unreliable. Strong values provide structure, and structure creates safety. Boundaries are closely tied to self-respect. Boundaries communicate where a person ends and where others begin. Women often test boundaries indirectly by making requests, expressing expectations, or introducing mild challenges. The goal is not to control, but to observe whether a man can assert himself calmly and respectfully. A man who has no boundaries may initially seem accommodating, but over time he is perceived as lacking self-worth. Conversely, aggressive or rigid boundaries signal insecurity rather than strength. Healthy boundaries are clear, calm, and consistent. Self-respect is the foundation that supports both values and boundaries. It is reflected in how a man treats his time, his commitments, and his emotional energy. Women notice whether a man sacrifices his standards to gain validation, or whether he maintains dignity, even when doing so risks disapproval. Self-respect does not require dominance or stubbornness. It is expressed through quiet confidence and the willingness to walk away from situations that compromise personal integrity. This evaluation often appears when a woman challenges a man's decisions or introduces situations that test his limits. She may observe whether he becomes apologetic, defensive, or resentful when holding his ground. A man who can calmly say no, explain his position without over-justifying, and remain emotionally steady demonstrates internal strength. This signals that he can be trusted to lead himself and, by extension, contribute to a balanced partnership. Consistency is critical in this process. Values and boundaries must be upheld over time to be believable. A man who enforces boundaries one day and abandons them the next creates confusion and emotional instability. Female psychology is highly attuned to patterns, and inconsistency erodes trust faster than disagreement. Ultimately, this second question determines respect. Attraction may begin with emotional connection, but respect sustains desire. When a man shows that he values himself, honors his principles, and maintains healthy boundaries without hostility, he communicates maturity and reliability. This allows a woman to relax into trust, knowing that the relationship is built on mutual respect, rather than imbalance or emotional uncertainty. These questions are rarely asked directly. They are embedded in conversations or situations because human attraction operates more through observation than interrogation. In female psychology, especially in the context of emotional and relational evaluation, direct questioning can produce rehearsed answers. Indirect testing, however, reveals authentic behavior. This is why the most important assessments happen naturally, through everyday interactions, rather than through explicit conversations about intentions or character. Embedded questions often appear as casual remarks, emotional expressions, or situational challenges. A woman might share a concern, express uncertainty, or present a mild disagreement, not to provoke conflict, but to observe response patterns. She is watching tone, timing, and emotional regulation rather than content alone. How a man listens, pauses, and responds provides more psychological information than any verbal promise could. Situations also function as evaluative tools. Stressful moments, changes in plans, or moments of vulnerability create pressure that reveals underlying traits. When things do not go as expected, emotional masks fall away. A man's behavior under these conditions communicates whether he is adaptable, patient, and grounded, or reactive and unstable. Female psychology values predictability under uncertainty because it signals safety and reliability. Indirect questioning also allows for assessment without confrontation. Directly asking about boundaries, values, or emotional control can feel intrusive or premature. By embedding questions within natural interactions, a woman protects the emotional flow of the connection while still gathering critical information. This method reduces defensiveness and increases the likelihood of observing genuine responses. Language plays an important role in this process. Questions may be framed as stories, opinions, or hypothetical scenarios. A woman might discuss past experiences or societal topics to see how a man processes emotional information. His reactions reveal empathy, maturity, and perspective. These conversational cues are often subtle, but they are psychologically rich. Another reason these questions are embedded is that consistency matters more than isolated answers. A single response can be misleading, but repeated behavior across different situations reveals patterns. Women pay attention to how a man treats service staff, handles frustration, manages time, and responds to boundaries. Each interaction contributes to an ongoing assessment of character. Importantly, these embedded questions are not traps. They are adaptive mechanisms designed to reduce risk. Emotional investment carries potential cost, and the mind seeks reassurance before committing. Observational evaluation allows attraction to develop organically while maintaining psychological safety. For men, understanding this process shifts focus away from trying to say the right things. What matters is not performance, but alignment. When behavior naturally reflects emotional stability, self-respect, and consistency, the questions answer themselves. There is no need to search for hidden tests because authenticity consistently provides the strongest signals. Ultimately, the indirect nature of these questions reflects how attraction truly functions. It is built through moments, reactions, and patterns over time. When a man's everyday behavior aligns with his values and emotional capacity, trust forms quietly and attraction deepens without the need for direct interrogation or explanation. How a man responds matters more than what he answers because attraction and trust are shaped primarily by emotional signals rather than verbal content. In female psychology, the nervous system reads tone, pacing, body language, and emotional regulation far faster than it processes words. A well-phrased answer delivered with tension, defensiveness, or neediness communicates insecurity, while a simple response delivered calmly and confidently communicates strength and reliability. Responses reveal internal state. When a man is asked a challenging question or placed in a mildly stressful situation, his reaction exposes how he manages pressure. Does he pause and think, or does he rush to fill silence out of discomfort? Does his tone remain steady, or does it shift toward irritation or over-explanation? These cues indicate whether he is emotionally grounded or dependent on external validation. Women subconsciously register these signals as indicators of long-term compatibility. Content can be rehearsed, emotional regulation cannot. Many men focus on saying the right thing, believing attraction is won through logic or persuasion. However, female psychology prioritizes emotional safety over intellectual correctness. A man may give a technically perfect answer, but if it is delivered with anxiety, defensiveness, or a desire to impress, it undermines the message. The response becomes less about the answer and more about the emotional energy behind it. Another critical factor is congruence. Congruence refers to alignment between words, emotions, and behavior. When a man's response is congruent, his message feels authentic and trustworthy. Incongruence, such as saying one thing while emotionally signaling another, creates discomfort. For example, agreeing verbally while showing resentment through tone or body language communicates inner conflict. Women are highly attuned to this mismatch and often interpret it as a lack of self-honesty or self-respect. How a man responds also demonstrates boundaries. A calm, measured response to pressure shows that he can hold his ground without aggression or submission. Over-justifying suggests insecurity, while dismissiveness suggests emotional unavailability. The ideal response communicates clarity and respect simultaneously. This balance signals emotional maturity and leadership, which are key components of attraction toward emotionally stable men. Timing matters as well. Taking a moment to respond rather than reacting impulsively demonstrates self-control. Silence, when used comfortably, signals confidence rather than avoidance. A man who is comfortable with pauses shows he is not afraid of tension or uncertainty. This emotional steadiness is far more persuasive than rapid explanations or attempts to smooth over discomfort. Over time, consistent responses shape perception more than isolated answers. A single strong response cannot compensate for repeated emotional volatility. Women observe patterns, how a man responds when tired, stressed, challenged, or misunderstood. These moments carry more weight than ideal scenarios because they reveal default behavior. Ultimately, attraction grows where responses communicate calm authority, self-respect, and emotional presence. Words matter, but they are secondary. It is the manner of response that signals whether a man is safe to trust, capable of leadership, and emotionally mature. When responses align with inner stability, attraction deepens naturally without the need for persuasive language. Over-explaining, defensiveness, or approval-seeking weakens attraction because these behaviors signal internal insecurity rather than emotional strength. In female psychology, attraction is closely tied to how grounded and self-directed a man appears. When a man feels the need to justify himself excessively, defend every point, or seek validation, it suggests that his sense of worth depends on external acceptance rather than inner confidence. Over-explaining often stems from anxiety about being misunderstood or rejected. While clarity is healthy, excessive explanation communicates discomfort with silence and uncertainty. Instead of appearing thoughtful, it can signal nervousness and a lack of trust in one's own position. Women tend to interpret this as emotional instability because it suggests that the man is trying to manage perception rather than remaining authentic. Emotional safety is undermined when responses feel forced or over-constructed. Defensiveness operates in a similar way. When a man reacts defensively to questions or mild challenges, it implies that his identity or self-esteem is fragile. Defensiveness shifts the interaction from mutual understanding to self-protection. Even if the content of his response is reasonable, the emotional tone communicates threat perception. Female psychology is highly sensitive to these cues, and defensive behavior often registers as potential conflict escalation in the future. Approval seeking is particularly damaging to attraction because it reverses relational polarity. When a man consistently seeks validation, agreement, or reassurance, he places emotional responsibility on the other person. This creates imbalance and emotional fatigue. Rather than feeling supported, a woman may feel pressured to manage his emotions or self-worth. Attraction diminishes when emotional dependency replaces emotional stability. These behaviors also disrupt authenticity. Over-explaining and approval-seeking can lead to inconsistency, where a man adjusts his opinions or boundaries based on perceived reactions. This inconsistency erodes trust. Women look for patterns that signal reliability, and shifting behavior to gain approval suggests a lack of internal compass. A man who stands comfortably in his values, even when challenged, appears far more attractive than one who adapts to please. Another key issue is that these behaviors reduce perceived leadership. Leadership in a psychological sense is the ability to remain composed, make decisions, and tolerate disagreement without losing emotional balance. Over-explaining and defensiveness suggest discomfort with tension. Approval-seeking suggests fear of disapproval. Both undermine the perception that a man can handle responsibility and emotional complexity. Importantly, reducing these behaviors does not mean becoming emotionally distant or uncommunicative. Healthy communication involves clarity, respect, and emotional presence without self-abandonment. A concise response delivered calmly conveys far more confidence than a long explanation driven by fear of rejection. Silence, when comfortable, often communicates security more effectively than words. Ultimately, attraction thrives where self-respect is visible. When a man responds with calm assurance, accepts misunderstanding without panic, and does not chase validation, he signals emotional maturity. This creates a sense of safety and stability that allows attraction to grow naturally. Over-explaining, defensiveness, and approval-seeking weaken that foundation by revealing insecurity rather than strength. Calm confidence signals maturity, experience, and psychological safety because it reflects an internal state that is not easily shaken by external circumstances. In female psychology, this quality is deeply reassuring. Calm confidence is not loud, performative, or dominant. It is expressed through steady behavior, measured speech, and emotional consistency. This form of confidence suggests that a man has navigated challenges, learned from them, and no longer needs to prove himself through reaction or control. Maturity is revealed in how a man manages his emotions, especially under pressure. Calm confidence shows that he can tolerate discomfort without becoming reactive. When disagreement arises, he does not rush to assert dominance or retreat into silence. Instead, he listens, considers, and responds with clarity. This emotional regulation indicates self-awareness and personal responsibility, which are hallmarks of maturity. Female psychology associates these traits with long-term reliability rather than short-term excitement. Experience contributes to calm confidence by reducing fear of uncertainty. Men who have faced failure, loss, and responsibility often develop a broader emotional perspective. They understand that not every challenge requires immediate reaction. This lived experience creates patience and perspective, which are communicated through demeanor rather than words. Women subconsciously recognize this steadiness as evidence that a man can handle future stress without destabilizing the relationship. Psychological safety emerges when behavior is predictable and non-threatening. Calm confidence creates an emotional environment where vulnerability feels safe. A woman feels freer to express herself when she senses that her emotions will be met with presence, rather than judgment or volatility. This safety is essential for deep attraction because it allows emotional intimacy to develop without fear of emotional consequences. Another important aspect of calm confidence is boundary clarity. A confident man can say no without hostility and yes without resentment. He does not over-explain his choices or seek validation for them. This clarity signals self-respect and inner alignment. Female psychology interprets this as leadership, not in a controlling sense, but in the ability to lead oneself emotionally. Calm confidence also communicates independence. A man who is comfortable with himself does not rely on constant reassurance or approval. This independence is attractive because it reduces emotional burden. Rather than feeling responsible for managing his self-esteem, a woman can engage from a place of mutual respect and balance. Importantly, calm confidence is consistent. It does not disappear under stress or emerge only in ideal situations. Women observe behavior across time to assess whether this quality is authentic. Consistency strengthens trust, while inconsistency creates doubt. Ultimately, calm confidence signals that a man is emotionally grounded, self-aware, and capable of navigating complexity. It reassures the subconscious that conflict will be handled with care, boundaries will be respected, and emotional safety will be maintained. This combination of maturity, experience, and psychological security forms a powerful foundation for lasting attraction. Passing these tests is about authenticity, not manipulation or rehearsed lines, because human attraction is highly sensitive to genuine behavior and emotional congruence. Women are not evaluating men based on what they say in theory or how well they can craft a clever response. Instead, they are observing patterns, consistency, and the natural alignment between words, actions, and underlying emotional state. Attempts to manipulate or rely on rehearsed lines are often easy to detect, even subconsciously, and they typically create the opposite of attraction, distrust, and emotional distance. Authenticity means showing up as one truly is, with awareness of both strengths and vulnerabilities. It requires self-knowledge and emotional honesty. When a man responds to subtle tests with calmness, clarity, and integrity, he signals that he is grounded and self-directed. Women pick up on this because emotional and relational evaluation is largely subconscious. The nervous system registers whether responses come from a stable inner state or from a need to impress, control perception, or gain approval. Authenticity communicates reliability, while inauthentic behavior, no matter how polished, communicates fragility or insecurity. Manipulation, on the other hand, often relies on strategies designed to elicit specific reactions or to create a desired impression. It may involve exaggeration, overpromising, or carefully choosing words to appear confident or attractive. Even if a manipulative approach succeeds temporarily, it is not sustainable. Subtle inconsistencies, micro-expressions, or emotional mismatches eventually reveal the gap between performance and reality. Female psychology is attuned to these cues, and the subconscious response is often decreased trust and diminished attraction, even if the conscious mind is unaware of why. Rehearsed lines are another common pitfall. While it may feel safe to prepare answers for common tests, such responses can lack the emotional authenticity that signals maturity and stability. A line delivered without genuine feeling often comes across as mechanical or defensive. Women unconsciously detect when a response lacks congruence with emotional state. Authenticity is expressed not just in words, but in tone, body language, pacing, and emotional presence. Every subtle cue contributes to the overall perception of reliability and trustworthiness. Passing tests authentically also involves accepting discomfort. Women may pose challenges, ask probing questions, or create tension not to provoke failure, but to assess how a man handles normal relational friction. Responding authentically does not require perfection or the absence of vulnerability. It requires composure, honesty, and alignment with one's values. This demonstrates emotional resilience and self-respect, which are far more attractive than a rehearsed or manipulative performance. Consistency is a critical aspect of authenticity. It is not enough to pass one test. Behavior must be sustained across time and situations. Authentic men respond in a stable manner even when tested repeatedly or under stress. Their behavior is predictable in its groundedness, which builds trust and deepens attraction. Manipulated or rehearsed responses are often situational, appearing only when a man anticipates being evaluated, which creates subtle but detectable patterns of inconsistency. Ultimately, the principle is simple. Attraction grows where authenticity exists, and it diminishes where manipulation or performance dominates. Women are drawn to men who operate from self-awareness, integrity, and alignment between words and actions. Passing tests through genuine behavior signals that a man is capable of emotional regulation, respects himself and others, and can provide the psychological safety and reliability necessary for long-term connection. Authenticity, not performance, is the key to passing these relational evaluations. Passing these tests is about authenticity, not manipulation or rehearsed lines, because human attraction is highly sensitive to genuine behavior and emotional congruence. Women are not evaluating men based on what they say in theory or how well they can craft a clever response. Instead, they are observing patterns, consistency, and the natural alignment between words, actions, and underlying emotional state. Attempts to manipulate or rely on rehearsed lines are often easy to detect, even subconsciously, and they typically create the opposite of attraction, distrust, and emotional distance. Authenticity means showing up as one truly is, with awareness of both strengths and vulnerabilities. It requires self-knowledge and emotional honesty. When a man responds to subtle tests with calmness, clarity, and integrity, he signals that he is grounded and self-directed. Women pick up on this because emotional and relational evaluation is largely subconscious. The nervous system registers whether responses come from a stable inner state or from a need to impress, control perception, or gain approval. Authenticity communicates reliability, while inauthentic behavior, no matter how polished, communicates fragility or insecurity. Manipulation, on the other hand, often relies on strategies designed to elicit specific reactions or to create a desired impression. It may involve exaggeration, over-promising, or carefully choosing words to appear confident or attractive. Even if a manipulative approach succeeds temporarily, it is not sustainable. Subtle inconsistencies, micro-expressions, or emotional mismatches eventually reveal the gap between performance and reality. Female psychology is attuned to these cues, and the subconscious response is often decreased trust and diminished attraction, even if the conscious mind is unaware of why. Rehearsed lines are another common pitfall. While it may feel safe to prepare answers for common tests, such responses can lack the emotional authenticity that signals maturity and stability. A line delivered without genuine feeling often comes across as mechanical or defensive. Women unconsciously detect when a response lacks congruence with emotional state. Authenticity is expressed not just in words, but in tone, body language, pacing, and emotional presence. Every subtle cue contributes to the overall perception of reliability and trustworthiness. Passing tests authentically also involves accepting discomfort. Women may pose challenges, ask probing questions, or create tension not to provoke failure, but to assess how a man handles normal relational friction. Responding authentically does not require perfection or the absence of vulnerability. It requires composure, honesty, and alignment with one's values. This demonstrates emotional resilience and self-respect, which are far more attractive than a rehearsed or manipulative performance. Consistency is a critical aspect of authenticity. It is not enough to pass one test. Behavior must be sustained across time and situations. Authentic men respond in a stable manner even when tested repeatedly or under stress. Their behavior is predictable in its groundedness, which builds trust and deepens attraction. Manipulated or rehearsed responses are often situational, appearing only when a man anticipates being evaluated, which creates subtle but detectable patterns of inconsistency. Ultimately, the principle is simple. Attraction grows where authenticity exists, and it diminishes where manipulation or performance dominates. Women are drawn to men who operate from self-awareness, integrity, and alignment between words and actions. Passing tests through genuine behavior signals that a man is capable of emotional regulation, respects himself and others, and can provide the psychological safety and reliability necessary for long-term connection. Authenticity, not performance, is the key to passing these relational evaluations. If you found these insights valuable, make sure to like, share, and follow the channel for more psychology-based relationship tips.